Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic Item Reviews and General Musical Meanderings. Pick it up where we left off in this big 12-part series. All new music for the beginning of this year. And of course, this is going to set the standard for what we're listening to throughout the rest of the year. We're going to use these to compare and contrast new music so that at the end of the year, we have a very well-vetted set of 20 albums for our top 20 of 2024. So let's go and get started. First one I got up today is Black Pumas, Chronicles of a Diamond.
My respects to the Grandmaster for the lines. Such a pretty thing, how the melody abides. But life is more than a love song. It's more than a fantasy, more than this life is more than a dream, y'all. It's more than a fantasy.
The Black Pumas are now, apparently, an iconic Austin band, so much so that they even got their own holiday by Mayor Steve Adler. And to me, that feels a little bit funny, because I grew up in Austin and spent a lot of time there, and my idea of like Austin music is Eric Johnson and Stevie Ray Vaughan and Christopher Cross. And I know that kind of dates me, but that's the kind of Austin that I remember. And last time I lived in Austin a few years ago, it kind of started to feel like the Austin that is there now sort of built on the grave of the Austin that I grew up with. But I still feel like there's pockets of Austin still that float around inside of that city as it is now. And I feel like some of those graves that I kind of jokingly say that the current Austin is built on has some ghosts. And I think Black Pumas is one of the groups out there that kind of channeling the ghost of Austin's music past. Because with all sincerity, I immediately took to Chronicles of a Diamond, and I've not once regretted putting it on in all the times I've listened to it so far. It's got vocals that have clear connections to classic soul, but the sound of the group has this kind of grit and bluesy vibe to it like the Austin of old. You could almost describe it like a late period Prince album, but that somehow has the Black Keys as the backing band. In particular, that lead track, More Than a Love Song, man, that song is really infectious, and I walk around singing it all the time. It's nuanced, poignant lyrics and sort of unexpected harmonic turns that it takes made it an instant hit to me, and has put it in my internal jukebox, just kind of be blissfully put on repeat. Next up I got Or the Molecules, Human Safari.
You can take my heart in your palm. You can take my, it's in the heart of
In their bio, Or the Molecules self-describes as a group that is identified by timeless nostalgia, storytelling, space disco, and retro electronica. And I think that's kind of not a terrible description. Certainly, Or the Molecules sound sits at sort of the middle of a nexus of those things. And there are clear elements, I think, that reflect these. You could argue the point that all those elements are there. And they all bring the album into a very irresistible focus. Now, when you say nostalgia, my ears always kind of perk up a little bit, because I'm always fascinated by the way that music can evoke nostalgia. And I'm always fascinated by the way that musicians use nostalgia in their music. It's a powerful emotion. In particular, the keyboard sounds they use are lifted directly from the era of the DX7. So this kind of imbues Human Safari with a very distinctly 80s sort of female-led pop tone. But there's this underpinning of like groovy 70s era, like groovy funk. And that kind of gives us this kind of glossy 70s vibe. So, Or the Molecule almost feels like Bananarama from the top up, but from the waist down, it feels sort of like Stereolab. And the combination of these styles kind of give it a vehicle for really infectious and ultimately very accessible tunes. Next up, I got Tigran Hamasyan's StandArt. StandArt jazz is a style that is at best facing academic museumization, sort of in the name of preservation. The question that arises is, what do you have to do to make a standards album that really adds anything to the oeuvre? I mean, really, what more could be said with another couple of courses of all the things you are that hasn't already been said. Well, any smart contemporary jazz person will find a way to inject their unique personality into the music. And this is what Tigran Hamasyan's done extremely well in this album. He's injected his arrangements and his performances with a style that stays within the rules of jazz while really maintaining a clear and distinctive identity. Hamasyan's usual compositional approach leans towards jazz fusion with like a sprinkling of his native kind of folk Armenian styles. StandArt is his first album of jazz standards, and he manages to contribute to the jazz canon in a really meaningful way by showing his unique personality within these recordings. And in particular, his playing is very angular and kind of almost heavy-handed. It kind of recalls to a degree like Thelonious Monk. But the heart of StandArt, I think, is really in his carefully considered arrangements, which are both really deferential and creative. And finally, I got Anteloper's Pink Dolphins. Now, like Hamasyan, Anteloper clearly has jazz at the foundation of what they're doing, but there's less of an attempt here to sort of preserve the tradition of jazz standards. Instead, Anteloper takes a style that's a little bit more aligned with hip-hop and electronic standards than it is with, the walking bass lines and comping in the piano. Now, argument could be made that Pink Dolphins is kind of created in the same sort of spiritual tradition as Miles Davis's 60s crossover psychedelic work that produced this albums like Bitches Brew. There's certainly a sense that it has a connection to those recordings, but because it's contemporary, it allows it to be distinguished and have roots firmly in the present day. Pink Dolphin features some really incredibly tight and aggressive and angular grooves, especially at the beginning, in which the bass and the drums lock into really powerful effect. Now, I think as the album progresses, this angularity kind of gives way to thicker textures that kind of coalesce in a way that's kind of similar to what you'd see in a shoegaze album, but a lot funkier and a lot more in the vein of grimy, samples-influenced hip-hop. And paradoxically, this sort of noisier background approach gives trumpeter Jamie Branch a little bit more room to cut through with really aggressive solo lines and loungy singing. But that's all I got for you guys this time around. So if you like this video, please like and subscribe and share it with your friends. Also follow me over on Spotify. I got tracks up that represent all these albums. And if you want to be involved in my Viewer's Choice Top 20, please sign up at my Patreon below. And until you see you next time, I'll catch you guys on the flip side.